Crispy here to tell you some exciting news. This year marks the 10th anniversary of my comic, Ghost Junk Sickness. To celebrate, we're going to be opening a call for art to be showcased on the official GJS website the week of the anniversary, June 3rd to 7th. Check out Studio Cartridge on Blue Sky or Tumblr for more details on where to submit your piece.
And I'm Verathane. I use she/they web. Sorry.
She/they webcomics.
The coveted webcomic pronouns.
Yes, my pronouns are web and comic.
Just do it! Don't let your dreams be dreams. Yesterday said tomorrow. So just do it! Make your dreams come true!
Hello, and welcome to Screen Tones, where we talk anything and everything webcomics. Today we're going to be talking about collectives and peer groups focused around comics or art, what they are, what they can do, and why you might want to be involved with one. I'm Delphina, I use she/her pronouns, and I make the webcomic Sombulus.
I'm Finn, I use they/them pronouns, and I make the webcomic Heirs of the Veil.
I'm Verathane. I use she/they pronouns, and I make the webcomics Geralt and Witchwood.
Excellent. Okay. I'm so happy to have everybody here. We're going to be talking about collectives. Full disclosure, we're all part of a collective together, so I really wanted to get this group specifically talking about it. Collective groups used to be a little more popular than they are today, but we still have a few options around, and new ones can crop up. It's worth revisiting what they are, how they've worked historically, and how they work now, because they can really be a source of support among artists, especially in situations like right now where social media platforms might scatter all your friends and colleagues to the four winds. It's really important to kind of have that support and come together in maybe a more structured way than just a follow list. So we're going to talk about it today. I'm excited. I'm just gonna throw the question out there to everyone. Maybe we'll start with you, Finn. Like, what experience do you have with groups like collectives with your work? Why did you look into them? Is there anything that you didn't expect that you were going in that you were surprised by? Like, kind of talk us through the history of how you felt about collectives.
I think Spider Forest was like my first proper collective I was a part of back in the day where I was like more active in the German manga anime scene. I was also like part of a smaller collective, but that was run a little bit weirdly, I would say. It was more on the line of someone was like managing the thing, and when they had an idea about like comics anthology or something that they wanted to publish, they asked members of the collective, and everyone had to throw money onto the table to get that financed. I don't know, that was like a little bit chaotic.
What's that, like pre-Kickstarter days, or like?
Very much like I think Kickstarter was like already a thing, but it wasn't really like utilized by a lot of German artists at the time. And I think in Germany, for smaller collectors like these, it was more of a given that you would invest your own money to help get something to print. But because one person was kind of managing that on their own, and nobody else in that small collective really had any like say in what was happening, it wasn't the most pleasant experience, I would say. And it also took me a while until I looked into collectives again after that. And that was basically when I got into webcomics, because beforehand I was basically publishing comics in print. And so when I actually got into webcomics a few years after that, I was like, finding a lot of comics that had that little Spider Forest banner, and I thought a lot of the comics were really cool. So I looked into it and I actually applied with the first comic that we published, which in hindsight, I'm kind of glad that we didn't get into Spider Forest at the time because the comic was not very good. But like my main incentive for trying to get into Spider Forest as a collective was I kind of wanted to, I don't want to say profit off of the community, but I think it's more like I wanted to like be part of a community and maybe kind of help build a community at the time and like find connections to other artists. I think that was like one of my main incentives because webcomics can be kind of lonely, and a lot of the times you're just like you don't know what you're doing. I think collectives are just a great place to find like-minded people who can help you in your endeavors or with whom you can maybe organize cool webcomic related activities.
Yeah, I definitely hear you about like when it's a little different when it's like somebody's the leader and you're kind of going along with whatever they want to do and they're making the decisions about what anthologies you're going to or what places that you want to go for conventions or whatever. And that can be really good because you get things done that way. You like there's a focus. But if you're not completely aligned with whatever they're doing, that can be a kind of wobbly structure and eventually you might not be satisfied with the direction it's going. So I much prefer like having those peers, knowing that we're all on the same level, we're all working together and all of our voices kind of matter. I think that's one of the strengths of a peer group.
Yeah, yeah. Like the problem with collectives that are mostly structured around one person can also like lead to either the person taking on too much of the work and burning out by trying to keep the collective alive, or in the case of the person that was leading our collective, like at the time, it was like after a while it became pretty apparent that she basically, when we did anthologies and stuff like that, she would basically give herself the most space with her stories in the anthology. So she basically kind of used the collective as like someone to give her money so she could like publish her works.
Oh no. Yeah, I you have to keep that in check. If you're going to be part like leading a group or something like that, you do have to be objective. And that's hard. It can be very hard to be objective because we're all working our butts off here and we all want to like showcase the hard work we're doing with a collective, but you have to kind of take it in moderation. Um yeah. What about you, Thane? Like what kinds of experience do you have with comic groups, collective groups? Why did you look into them initially? What did you find? Tell us the
Um,
stories.
I feel I've been in Spider Forest for a long time. I think I applied in 2009, and at the time I had been the comic had been going for about 2 years, and when I started it, I was posting it mostly to an audience that I assumed consisted mostly of my like real life handful of friends and a couple of family members and a couple of coworkers who asked about it. And the idea that there were more people out there who could be reading these things came to my awareness, and I started looking at forums and things. Like I found a website called the Webcomic List, which is still around as a website now. Their goal was just to have be a list of all the webcomics that existed, which is even at the time it was pretty ambitious. So they had like a website that would track like what was updating on what day, so people could use it as kind of a reading list assistant to check like, oh, this updated today, I'm going to go read it. And they had a forum attached to the site which had a pretty big community that was pretty active about posting about things. There were a lot of folks on there who are now like really active in webcomics or comics in general, who were regulars on that forum at the time. So I was checking it on the daily, and I saw announcements that Spider Forest was open for applications. And I was like, what's this Spider Forest thing? What a funny idea. And I didn't
Spiders and
apply,
forest.
right? A collective, a group, another forum like this one, but like slightly more exclusive. Kind of exciting, but also kind of scary. So I didn't apply the first year that I saw that those ads, but I think the next time I saw a post about it, like a year later, I did apply, and I got in with my first comic, Churalt, and just kind of started poking around. And I think the main thing that I was after at the time was really just that community, which I kind of had gotten a taste of through the webcomic list forums. Like those were completely public, so it was a mixture of like regulars who were making webcomics, but also like people who would pop in and make an account one day just to be like, has anybody heard of this webcomic? I read it 3 years ago. It had a girl who turned into a bear or something like that, and like people would try to guess. Like just post like that, and then they would disappear and never come back. So the idea of a group where like it was a little tighter, and just having kind of access to that space was really important to me. And once I got to kind of knowing everybody, it was really nice just having like a social circle of people, other creators who were all a bit more like on the same page, and sharing resources and doing cross promotion. And the cross promotion itself is like also pretty valuable when you're like starting out with a comic. Like we all are posting these on the internet because we want people to read them, and to get people to read them, they need to hear about it first. So groups like that, like Spider Forest, which is a collective that also has a link share where everybody will have a banner at the top of their page, which randomly goes through other banners of other members so that you'll be linked on multiple other websites. That can be useful as well. And Spider Forest isn't the only group that is doing that even today. Because in 2009, there were a bunch more collectives. That used to be kind of the main way people would find comics, was through link pages on webcomics or through groups like Spider Forest. Or at the time, there were like several other collectives out there. There was one called Sage Comics that isn't around anymore, that was pretty large. Unfortunately, Spider Forest is now the sole survivor as far as collectives go, but there are other types of groups which are just link or banner exchanges, and there are still a few of those out there. Like there's one that I just heard about, which is literally just called webcomicring.org, and if you go there you can see like a little drop down with all their comics on it, and the link to each other on the page. There's also a Knife Beetle, which is the same kind of thing. Like you join it just to have access to the web ring function, but it doesn't have all the bells and whistles of a full collective where they run like different projects and stuff, because Spider Forest has the anthologies and they have like the big community hub and a lot of other like outreach going on.
Yeah, I think it's important too that like it's not like a publisher, it's not like a business or anything. It's just a supportive environment for people to kind of grow and teach and build each other up. There are a lot of bells and whistles, but those like came over time for sure. Like Spider Force didn't start off doing everything under the sun, and it kind of you'll see it wax and wane depending on how many people are active, what's going on in people's lives. And I think that the fact that we do have regular application seasons to get new people in and kind of engage people on a regular basis helps keep the membership wanting to innovate it and like figure out, okay, well, let's do another convention. Well, let's start doing anthologies. Let's start doing blah, 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 blah. But I think the takeaway there too is just it didn't happen overnight. None of this is going to happen overnight. And I would love to see more collectives again, but like just take it one step at a time. Start with a web ring, start with a link exchange that's simple, and a little Discord where you just chat about stuff, and like it can grow from there for sure. I think that's just there's a lot of strength in that. For me, I liked comics. I was doing them on my own, and it's kind of a similar story where, I just wanted a community. I wanted to like I was passionate about being an indie creator. I wasn't really sure if I wanted to approach a publisher or anything like that, but I didn't know if there were any other groups out there that were just for organizations to like make comics and kind of talk with other people. I was listening to the Paper Wings podcast way back in the day, which was kind of more art centric and hey, let's talk about let's do inspirational things. And one of the guest posts on there was a member of Spider Forest, and they talked about being involved with Spider Forest. I got familiar with their work. I saw that they were saying, "Hey, our application season is open. I think it's a pretty cool place. If you want to try to check it out, go ahead." And so I didn't really know what to expect other than that, but I knew that I liked this comic and I liked the person running it. And I'm like, well, yeah, I would be in company with that. I think that's a cool thing. Let me just apply and see what happens. And I did get in, and it was a little different than I was expecting. I wasn't really sure what to expect, but it was big. It was a lot bigger than I thought it was gonna be. And I don't think I realized like how many people and how much history it had until I got in there, and I'm like, whoa, there's some seriously cool stuff going on here. And I have volunteerism. I am chronically trying to stick my nose into organizational roles, so it didn't take me too long to like get involved and start like, hey, we should do this and that and the other thing. And it was just so cool to have like a body of people who were on board with that, like, yeah, let's do things. And because it's hard to do it alone. Like, how am I going to make an anthology by myself? That seems like a lot. But if somebody else knows how to like do the artwork, if someone can make a cool like cover, if somebody else can figure out the crowdfunding or however we're going to do this, and if somebody else can do the print production part in InDesign or whatever, like you're kind of assembling Voltron at that point. You're just bringing together everybody's strengths and doing something that none of you could do like on your own. And that part is really cool to me. Also, recently, I think in the last year, the Cartoonist Cooperative popped up, and I applied for that. And so I'm also a part of that too. It's a little different. They're kind of a member driven organization that like is a little more career focused. Think there's a lot of like high profile names in there that like, whoa, I'm in this place with this person. Wow, okay. And the scope is a little more broad. It doesn't seem to be genre or format based. I think you can have web comics or print comics or whatever. And also just Spider Force kind of tends towards genre fiction. This is not exclusively genre fiction, but the membership is decided by the founders. There's actually a lot of people. How they do it is they have structured promotional campaigns as one of their main features, which means if you're a member, you can submit a campaign through a form, and if it's approved, it runs for 2 months, and it's basically your chance to ask the rest of the members for help with stuff like making flyers or getting editorial feedback on drafts. Someone went in and said, hey, I have this video, can someone chop it up and make it TikTok sized? Like reaching out to comic stores to get them to order print copies, like all this like marketing outreach stuff we wish publishers would take our comics and do for us. But like the Cartoonist Cooperative doesn't make you sign away your rights to get access to that stuff. So it's also kind of run on this many hands make light work philosophy, and I think that's just so cool. They're not I think they're pretty new. We'll see how it holds up, but I really hope it works out because that kind of mutual aid approach is just very, very intriguing and attractive to me. So, with that, I mean, I just wanted to ask because I think this comes up a lot. How is a collective different than a publisher? Like, what kinds of things, like, eh, why would you want to be part of a collective versus trying to get your work published? Like, what's the dichotomy there? I'm gonna throw it to you, Finn.
Yeah, so I think they're very different from each other because so a collective you have like your built-in community, no matter what the collective is actually for. If they're like I don't know, just a community that helps each other out, or if it's like people that help each other market. So you have an active community that, for the most part, will be there for you. If you have like problems, questions, you can reach out to them. And with a publisher, well, you have your publisher. Depending on what kind of publisher it is, if they're maybe a little bit smaller, if it's an indie publisher, if it's a mainstream publisher, you might get into contact with other people that are published by that specific publisher, but it's not really community building. And for the most part, I guess you approach a publisher to get your works out there, and you hope that if they do, they will market your comic to a degree that you do not have to put as much work into that. So the main difference for me, it's like that one is like a business relationship. Each party is like contractually obligated to fulfill their side of the deal, while in a collective, it's a group of peers. I mean, there can be business related things, especially if you do projects like anthologies and run Kickstarters together, but for the most part, it's way more chill, I would say. And of course the expectations that you have to go into approaching a publisher for your work and going to a collective with your work should be different, because if I go to a publisher, I want my work published, I want editing for whatever I'm publishing, and I want marketing, even though nowadays we all know that especially in the marketing department that can be really lacking, and a lot of like artists are kind of forced to do the marketing themselves. But with a collective, my expectations are like way different. I basically only expect the community and the community aspects, and depending on the collective and how the collective is structured, maybe also some sort of marketing help. But I also think that with a collective, there's also kind of this part that you have to be constantly a little bit proactive to be a productive part of the collective. Like with publishing, for the most part, it's like you draw your comic, it goes into editing, and like with having the comic done, you're basically done. You fulfilled your part of the deal. But with a collective, you kind of have to, like, if you want to receive something, you also have to give something. You cannot just be like, okay, here's my thing. Please share my thing with others. Please give me all the like positives of the collective without me having to actually invest something. I guess that kind of like makes it sound like work, but I think that actually like interacting in a community is incredibly fun. So it's not really like, I don't know, something stressful. It's just like if you're in a collective and you like the other members of the collective and you like other people's comics, then you will probably already be incentivized to like interact and do your part and try to help other people in the collective.
That's such a good point too about like it. you already kind of have that disposition, right? Because if you have friends who make web comics, you're already kind of rooting for them. So in a collective relationship like that follows naturally. That feels so natural, to kind of like, yeah, I want to give back to them. I want to be proactive, and here's a structure that I can work within to do something that I know will be meaningful to them. And I do think, like, being published or going to a publisher is completely valid, if like that's just not your jam. If you're just making your thing and you don't want to have to, you just don't have the bandwidth to be pushing other people's things or reading it or keeping up with things, I think that can be just really tricky to balance, if you just don't have the energy for that. So definitely no shade to people who aren't like, oh yes, I want to be involved with every other comic person in the world. Like, nobody has the energy to do all of that. But if you do, if you're already like feeling that vibe, just go with it. I think there's just so many cool options for you in terms of either joining existing collectives or, I don't know, making your own. It could happen. How about you, Thane? Like, what are the key differences? Because yeah, you work with publishers and you also work with the collective, so I'm really curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, you guys have covered most of the broader differences between the two, in that like the collective will be much more of a reciprocal social relationship, um whereas a publisher is much more of a binding kind of a legal business relationship that you enter into. And the nice thing about the collective approach is that, I mean, in addition to just having access to a social circle that feels like a bunch of friends who can be like supportive of each other, it can be a lot more flexible. Like whenever life gets in the way, if you need to go on a hiatus or something like that, it's just as easy as being like, hey folks, I'm going on hiatus. Whereas if you were in a publisher relationship and you need to take like a month or a few months off of like working on new pages for whatever reason, accident, family situation, whatnot, you may have to answer to them, legally speaking. If deadlines start slipping, then suddenly there's like money involved, and it's a whole, it becomes a problem. My publisher involvement has been kind of a bit more limited. So Witchwood is in a publisher called Hiveworks, which is a web publisher, and they're kind of a hybrid publisher model that, like, on the outside it looks an awful lot like a collective, in that they have a hub website with a listing of webcomics, and if you go and visit it, it can look a bit similar, because you'll be like, oh, here's all the members, and like here's banners for their comics, and you can read about the little blurb and then go click a link to take you to the page itself. Under the surface, the publisher aspect kicks in, where there's an ad ring that the contract gives you access to. So all the comics that are a part of Hiveworks will have these ads on their pages, and that's kind of the main financial incentive, when it comes to that circle. And Yeah, it's just it's a bit of a different, slightly different vibe.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds interesting too, because I think there's a lot of print publishers out there. There's not a lot of like web publishers out there, unless you're talking about like Webtoon or Tapas or something like that. But there is money involved. You are like selling a product basically, which is your work, and so you do have to show up for the job. So it's important to keep track of what's going on there. I mean, and yeah, publishers are really interesting, but if you're still feeling like, the collectives, that's the vibe for me. What is your advice to someone looking to either join or start a collective? Like, what are some bad or good reasons for trying to get involved with a group of peers? Maybe a collective, maybe a web ring, just like anything like that. What do you think, Finn?
So, for that reasons, I would say if you're looking for a place where you can to only promote your work without investing a lot, I think that would be like a bad reason to join a collective or even start a collective, because like, yeah, the second one, I mean, I've already experienced someone starting a collective to kind of try and promote their own work and get money together to get the stuff printed. I've also seen like a lot of small indie publishers like popping off out in Germany, which were mostly like single people who try to benefit from the publisher status to get like their own comics out and to get ISBN numbers like cheaper. So I think that's for the most part not a very good reason, and I don't think I've ever seen like a collective or a publisher built on that basis actually like survive for more than a year or anything. A better reason would be actually to want to build a community and to want to interact with community, to actually like create a space where people can help each other. And one of my tips would probably be, if you want to start a collective, then I would first look for people who you know are actually reliable, people where you know that they have like resources that they can add to the collective, because there's like a lot that has to be taken account when like starting an endeavor like that. And people that you know will stick with the collective at least for a while to get it going and not flake on the project as soon as stuff starts to get difficult. Because I think that there's like, in the past there have been like so many collectives and like a lot of them don't exist anymore for one reason or another, and a lot has to do with like time and people being unable to put as much of their time into those collectives as they've used to. So if someone wants to start a collective, it's also like there's no shame in just going slow with it and slowly building it up and not like investing too much into it, because you could like run the risk of getting burnt out if you like put too much into it in the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like that is a pattern that I've seen in a lot of other like collectives that start up and then don't last super long. There's kind of a few things that can go awry. Like if they're leaning too heavily on just one person for organization, like even if they're the person who founded it and is the most excited at first, I feel like that can also be kind of unsustainable, including for them, because even if you're super excited about this thing at the beginning, it can actually be a lot of work keeping this kind of thing, this kind of operation going for like for more than a year or so. So if you spread around the responsibility, and also to make sure that like all the members feel some sense of agency and involvement within like the way that things are run. I think one thing that Spider Forest does that's really cool is when there's a round of new applications coming in, everybody will vote on it, like every single member. And it's very democratic in that way, which has a couple of functions, because it makes sure that the new people coming on board are folks that the majority of the existing members of the collective they like their work or feel like they vibe with them. But it also helps everyone kind of feel, I guess, a sense of ownership over what's happening. Like, oh, I'm involved. Like, I'm a part of this, and I have a voice in what's happening here.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think something that I also think is really cool about Spider Forest is that there's like the possibility of starting your own project within the group. So I think like what you've mentioned, having agency, is actually like a really important point, that you actually feel okay, you're doing something within your collective, you're involved, um, and like you're getting something like off the ground and people are actually excited or participate in like your ideas or what you're doing for the collective.
Yeah, it's that sense of like my cool big idea has like just as good a chance of getting off the ground as like as anyone else's within the group. And within on kind of that topic, there's a lot of cool big projects that a lot of creators just get very excited about, like anthologies and Kickstarters and stuff like that. And being in a group where there's people with experience in all those things, whether it be they were published in another anthology previously, so they kind of have seen that process from the inside, or this person knows how to run a Kickstarter, and this person knows how to lay a book out in InDesign, or is really good at wrangling people. You can kind of have folks step into those roles with no actual pressure, because it's not like there's no formal relationship here forcing people into it, but like when you get like how many members are in Spider Forest, it's like 70 or 80. When you have that many people around who've been doing comics for a long time, some folks just have these skills and are excited to use them to help out like their friends and their community.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the admins at Spider Forest was like, a spider has 8 legs, and that's the metaphor for like how it walks and how it moves and how it goes, because you need like all 8 legs to keep going. Some people are going to get tired. Some people need to take a break for life reasons, and it really sucks to feel like, oh no, I'm going to let the entire group down. The entire thing is going to die if I am not one of the legs that's moving. And that's not the case. And I think that's kind of one of the secrets to our longevity that I would like to share with like anybody else who wants to start a group. Just like get some friends, to Finn's point, make sure they're reliable and they can do the work and step up when they need to, but like take advantage of everybody else's skills. Like make sure that comes together in a way. It can really be something beautiful and cool. So Thane, tell me too, like what is your advice to someone looking to join or start a collective? What should they be thinking? What's the mindset going in? What are some bad reasons to do it? Like, what do you think?
Well, to get this out of the way, I think a bad reason to do it is for money. There's not money in webcomics.
There's
I'm
no
sorry.
money. No, no, no.
So don't have that as your guiding star. Otherwise, I guess when like do lean into the ideas that excite like everyone who's in the group, but keep the expectations kind of mitigated and stick to things that you know immediately out of the gate that the people who are involved right now are definitely experienced with. So like if you don't have someone who's really good at building websites or something, like don't worry about offering hosting or building like a super like fancy site. Like if it needs to stay on Wix or Weebly or something like that, like maybe that just has to happen. You don't need to jump straight into big, exciting like crowdfunders and like ads and like all kinds of crazy bells and whistles, because that can burn people out very quickly. And I think getting that starting momentum and going from that kind of honeymoon phase of like cool new shiny project into like making it actually last a long time, like after that first maybe 3 or 6 months or so, when the initial hype about getting started wears off, like what's going to keep this group going and sticking together? And if everyone is like, if it's a tight circle of friends, then like that can kind of work out on its own, hopefully. But you want to make sure that the things that you're promising to one another are like within scope, and don't let that get away from you.
I've seen so many people with so many big ideas, and it's just like do what you can, do the small things, because like the act of finishing things, the act of completing things is kind of its own like endorphins. Like you get excited about what you've achieved and what you can do, and then you can build off of that. But if you keep like trying and going for the moon and trying to be a big like name or a big splash, and like it doesn't work out initially, like that kind of damages morale. You kind of have to figure the morale piece out to make everybody feel like, yeah, we're doing something and it's cool. I know, like, one of the projects we have in Spider Forest right now is we all make a group Spotify playlist every month, and people can contribute their songs, and somebody puts it on Spotify in a playlist. That's it. That's the only involvement. And there are always little themes about drawing grass, like what kinds of things would you listen to while you have like a repetitive thing that you're drawing? What kinds of things would you listen to while you're waiting for the train or whatever? And like it's so simple and it's so easy that anybody can do it, and at the end you get the product. And like that's the key. You have to do things that you can accomplish, because that's what makes people feel like they're contributing, they have agency, and making things that other people can appreciate. I think another thing that comes up in Spider Forest is people try to apply because they want to see if their comic is good enough. They want to see if like the merits of their comic are the best and stuff. And that's a kind of tricky one to be going into a collective mindset like for that validation. I think that can be dangerous because every group is different. Every group is going to have its preferences. And, even though we are very democratic in Spider Forest, in my personal opinion, like we do have our preferences, we do have our biases. And you can be doing something amazing that just doesn't like, we can't figure out how other people who like our stuff would necessarily transition into like your stuff. And and we don't want it to be a situation where we can't genuinely endorse somebody who joins Spider Forest if it's just like, well, this is kind of a thing that somebody else is doing. But yeah, so that's the thing too. Like you, whatever you're doing, whether you're part of a group or not, like that has value. You are learning. We're all learning, and nobody is perfect. Joining a collective expecting to be like part of this upper echelon of like top tier comics, like that's not necessary either. What you want to be cultivating is that relationship with your peers, with your friends, and really saying like we're all the same here. We all have different experiences, but we all have this in common, and we want to be able to work together as peers to make some cool stuff. And that's what it's all about to me. So unless anybody else has anything else, I think we're going to call that a wrap here. Thank you both for joining me. And yeah, I've been Delphina. You can find my webcomic Somnolus at somnolus.com and our collective at spiderforest.com.
I've been Finn, and you can find my webcomic, Heirs of the Veil, at heirsoftheveil.com, and yeah, check out Spider Forest.
And I've been Verathane. You can find my comics at chirelt.sevensmith.net or at witchwoodcomic.com.
Go read webcomics and go join collectives, but only if that's your thing. Woo!
Go make your own.
Or go make your I want to see more collectives for sure.
Yeah,
Go.
it would be nice. We need another golden age of webcomic collectives.
We're gonna do it. We're gonna make it. Go make collectives. Thank you for listening to Screen Tones, a webcomic podcast. Want to know some other ways to support us? Check out our Ko-fi at ko-fi.com/screentonescast, where your support will help us create more episodes, reach cool extra bonus goals, and keep us talking about anything and everything webcomics. You can also find us on Tumblr, Instagram, and our Discord server. Thank you so much for listening, sharing, rating, and supporting, and we'll see you next time.